On today's show, from President's Trophy winners to potentially a lost season, what is going on in Winnipeg? We'll get into the World Juniors camp starting next week. Could NHLers be loaned? And speaking of loans, the Montreal Canadiens have called up their top goalie prospect.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome inside this Wednesday, December 10th edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. And as always on Wednesday, it's a Battle of Ontario edition. Joining me is Mike DiStefano from Locked On Maple Leafs. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live bets all season long. We're a part of Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and we have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. And if you want more, go check out the Everydayer Club. You can go find the link to your favorite show and get more in on the action. Mikey, we got to start with the Winnipeg Jets, because from going and winning the entire league last regular season to stumbling out of the gate without their star goaltender Connor Hellebuyck, are you ready to determine this to be a lost season for the Jets?
No, I don't think it's a lost season. I think there's still time to get it back on the rails. Sounds like Hellebuyck's going to be returning rather soon. He's back on the ice, thankfully. But, it's definitely a disappointing season for the Winnipeg Jets. I think we all now know, were they 2-7-1 in their last 10 games? You might have the statistic as to what they are without Connor Hellebuyck. But, I think you get that guy back. He showed last year that, he is the league MVP. He is the Winnipeg Jets. And it sounds like he's going to be returning to the lineup in the next week or so. He would, if it was up to him, apparently. I know Darren Dreger was saying this on TSN the other day. He wants to play this weekend, but obviously the Jets want to take their time with it and make sure that he's fully ready to go. But within the next week or so, we could see him back on the ice. And if that's the case, I mean, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. It's not as though, they're completely sunk. The standings are so tight. In the NHL this year, they go out and they win 3 of their next 4 once he returns. All of a sudden, they're back in a playoff spot. So I don't think it's a sunk season. I think they still have a chance to get it back on the rails here.
I think it was a pretty big sting, though, last night. They end up losing 4-3 to the Dallas Stars at home, and it was a game they trailed 3-0. So hard to get some life into the Canada Life Center when you're starting like that and against a team that eliminated you in the second round of the playoffs last year, a divisional opponent at that, and one that has climbed the standings now. Dallas winning 4 in a row. They're 8-0-2 in their last 10. Even better beyond that, they are just 2 points behind the wagon of the Colorado Avalanche. And the reason why I say lost season could be on the table, not only because I'm living in Winnipeg right now and Jets fans around here are very, very perplexed at what's gone wrong beyond the injury to Connor Hellebuyck. And we'll get into some of the numbers about why these issues are deeper rooted than the goaltender. It would almost more so be that they're unmasking these issues because they don't have the league MVP bailing them out time after time. Yeah. Connor Hellebuyck with a .913 save percentage this season. And I know that it's unfair because sometimes it's spot starts, but now with a larger sample size, the other 2 goalies on the team are both under 900. And I mean, that just to me highlights how much better Connor Hellebuyck is than their other options. And maybe the defense plays a little bit differently, knowing that if they give up a rush chance the other way, it could be in the back of the net. But really, that's not their biggest concern, Mikey. My biggest concern with the Winnipeg Jets is that they're a 2-horse team offensively right now. Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele are having phenomenal seasons. Mark Scheifele's got 36 points. Kyle Connor's got 35 points, 10-point gap, and then it's their line mate, right winger Gabe Vilardi there. But if you take away their top 4 guys, throw Josh Morrissey in the mix on the back end, always phenomenal player, they are getting no secondary scoring. Adam Lowry coming back from offseason hip surgery, 1 goal in 16 games. Cole Perfetti, 2 goals in 14 games. Jonathan Taves, 3 goals in 28 games. And the King Daddy Topper, their quote-unquote replacement for Nikolai Ehlers that they picked up this summer. Oh boy, could not be going worse for Gustav Nyquist. 0 goals in 20 games.
I mean,
cannot win like that.
If Jets fans thought that Gustav Nyquist was the quote-unquote replacement for Nick Ehlers, then...
Well, in the lineup, he was.
I don't know. I mean, sure, okay. If I ended up going and playing a game, am I the replacement? No, you're a placeholder, not a replacement. There's a big difference between those two. Well, I guess it depends on how you are, like what the expectations are, I suppose. If you're calling it a lost season because it doesn't look like a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup, okay, yes, I guess in that way. But I never viewed the Jets as like a cup-winning team. I viewed them as a playoff team, but we all know once you get to the playoffs, well, Hellebuck going Hellebuck, and, they'll end up eliminating the first couple of rounds, and that's just the way it goes, the way it is. So I guess it depends on kind of what you mean by that. There are some concerns when you look at the underlying numbers for the Winnipeg Jets. You talk about the lack of offense, and they're not generating anything realistically. They rank 29th in the NHL in expected goals per 60. 29th, just 2.33 expected goals per 60 at 5-on-5. They rank 29th as well 30th in expected goal percentage. So 30th in the NHL in expected goals for percentage. So that's usually an indicator that you're not playing good hockey, right? You pretty much means you're not generating enough and you're giving up too much is what that'll tell you. So there are definitely some holes and some glaring deficiencies with this Winnipeg Jets team. And without all-star goaltending to kind of patch over that, this is what they are. Like, this is what this team is. But I think we all knew that because that's why Hellebuck was the MVP last year. That's literally why he was given league MVP, because everyone knew that this is what the Jets were, and he brings them up so much. So with him gone, it's not a surprise that they sunk in the standings and couldn't generate wins. They're just not that great of a hockey team. Now he's back.
I would push back on that a little bit, though, Mikey, because you don't win the President's Trophy just with good goaltending. You make the playoffs, sure, but this team scored a ton of goals last year too. They were 4th in the league in goals.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Hellebuck wasn't scoring goals.
Let me see where they were at last season. What were we looking at?
They were 4th.
25 goals.
Their power play was ridiculous. I know that.
You're looking at a crazy power play, because even last year they were 13th in goals at 5-on-5, goals per 60. Let's see where they were at. Expected goals, kind of in the similar spot, 12th.
Yeah, they had the number 1 power play in the league.
But then you lose Nikolai Ehlers, who's a massive part of your team, right?
Yeah.
That's a massive part of your team. That's one of your top wingers, a top 6 guy, who generated a lot of offense for you. So you lose that player. I mean, that was massive for them, clearly. And it's showing. Hopefully they can get it back on the rails. I don't think they're as bad as their numbers suggest. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that the team is not necessarily one I look at and think they can compete for a championship. I don't think that roster is championship worthy, to be honest.
It would be a shame to waste this season, though, from Mark Scheifele, because he has been incredible for them, carrying them to multiple victories.
Team Canada? Is he making Team Canada?
Man, he's given himself as good of a chance as he could have hoped for. I know this might open a can of worms. We'll probably get into it more in the next 2 weeks before the Olympic rosters are named right before New Year's, but I'd be very surprised if the roster isn't awfully similar to the Four Nations team.
Let's see where he is currently at. Mark Scheifele, minus 250 on FanDuel.
Everybody's minus money, though.
Everyone, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. But I wouldn't take Scheifele over Celebrini or Bedard. That to me is no brainer. And especially if you're thinking long term about getting Canada set up for the next generation. But man, he is a hell of a player, and he shows he can play with great players. Him and Kyle Connor have phenomenal chemistry together. But I think final answer, no, he does not make the Olympic team, but I do think that he has every right to be pissed off about that because he's having an incredible season. It's not like it's a flash in the pan either. Shifley was phenomenal last season and really kind of ever since Rick Bowness came in and they reset it. Like, yeah, he started his career great two-way player, kind of slumped off defensively for a few years. And then since Rick Bowness came in now with Scott Arniel as the head coach, he's really taken his game to a phenomenal, I would say, superstar. Is he a superstar in the league?
I would
borderline.
I mean, what borderline? Like I call him a star player. I don't know.
He's a top center on most teams.
Yeah, probably.
A lot of good centers in the league.
Yeah, maybe. He's definitely a star player, though. We could say
but
that.
My thesis or my final thoughts on the Winnipeg Jets is Kevin Cheveldayoff. He's been here since day one, and he's done a phenomenal job of building a culture where guys are re-signing in a place that is on a lot of players' no-trade list. Once they get there, they buy into what Mark Chipman and the ownership group is selling here, and you see it with Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Connor Hellebuck. The list goes on and on of guys, Americans too, who are choosing to spend their careers in Winnipeg. But what he has failed in the last 12 months is bringing in complementary pieces that are fitting in and going to elevate them. 2 years ago, and maybe he got a little gun shy because 2 years ago, they took big swings. They brought in Sean Monahan. They brought in Tyler Toffoli. They lose in the first round, and both of them leave for nothing, and you lose the assets. So they tried to go a little bit more conservatively, giving up second and third round picks at last year's deadline for Brandon Tanev and Luke Schenn. Neither of those players made any sort of notable impact. Some would say Luke Schenn actively hurts the team when he's on the ice at this point in his career. It's compounded with the Gustav Nyquist acquisition, and it's compounded even more by the fact that they haven't been able to get wins this season. So we'll see what happens next with the Winnipeg Jets, but with the Central Division the way it is, those top two seeds, I'm ready to lock and key the Colorado Avalanche, Dallas Stars 1-2. So now you're only looking at 3 potential playoff spots to get into, and you've got a number of teams that think that they belong in that spot. The Minnesota Wild, 7 wins in their last 10 games. They're sitting third right now, and there's a 5-point gap then between them and the top wild card, which is Edmonton, a Pacific team. So then you got 31 points with the Utah Mammoth, who've had an up and down season, but they're still a fun, exciting group that you can see going on some sort of a run. And then Chicago's even a point ahead of the Winnipeg Jets right now. Obviously, with Hellebuck being the X factor, that no doubt, in my opinion, will change, but we'll see. It's a tough road ahead for the Winnipeg Jets. And I think to start getting their captain, who I'm a huge fan of, Adam Lowry, producing offense would go a long way to help the depth scoring. Jonathan Taves, if you want to produce some offense too, that would help. But I don't think it's reasonable to assume that a 37-year-old is the answer to the offensive problems that are crippling the Winnipeg Jets right now. So that's one Canadian story to watch. We've got another one later on in the show where we'll get into the Montreal Canadiens' decision to call up Jacob Fowler. And this would be something if he gets his NHL debut. He's only 21 years old. He's a Florida kid. Don't see that too often, maybe more and more with the Panthers' recent success and the Lightning before that. But what kind of impact can that make for a Habs team that seems like they're either winning close games or losing in blowout fashion? Plus, the World Junior rosters, preliminary ones, have been released, but could we see some more NHL presence at this tournament? Those conversations are next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. I know it. I got packages showing up every day thanks to my wife. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses. It's really easy to lose track of your money this time of year. And that's exactly why Monarch has become such a game changer for me. I've been using it for about 8 to 10 months right now, and I feel so much more focused on my financial goals. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. It's rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple, easy-to-use dashboard. In minutes, you can check your net worth, links all your accounts, and keep track of contributions before deadlines. Monarch makes money check-ins simple, just a minute or two each week, and you're completely up to speed. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com. That's with code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now let's take it up a notch and go ad-free. You can join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On shows with no interrupted members-only Discord access and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. You can go to Supercast. The link will be in the description of this show to learn more. We appreciate all the Everydayers making us your first listen here on the network. One of my favorite times of the year. It's the most wonderful time. It's World Juniors, and we've got it in Minnesota this year, the state of hockey. And look, we're the only two Canadians who do Locked On NHL throughout the week at all the great hosts here. So are we biased? Hell yeah. But we're equally disappointed because back-to-back years, Team Canada has lost in the quarterfinals of the World Juniors, including on home ice last year in the nation's capital. There was a lot of discourse about the roster construction of that team. Guys who weren't even invited to camp. I'm looking at Beckett Seneca scoring game-winning goals in the National League this season saying, hey, maybe Team Canada could have used him last season. Number of decisions that were questionable. They're always tough calls, but these ones just felt blatantly obvious snubs. Zane Parekh, another one. Both those guys are eligible to play for Team Canada at this year's World Juniors. So on the rosters that were put out, Hockey Canada in particular, they did have a couple guys who are playing pro right now on their list, but not all of them. Mikey, do you think that A, Canada should be the favorite for this year's World Juniors? And two, how much help, if any, do you think they'll get from National League players?
I think they'll get some help for sure. I think they've already been granted a couple loans. You mentioned Zane Parekh as one from the Calgary Flames. Michael Misa looking like he's getting loaned out. He's going to be there from the San Jose Sharks, this year's #2 overall pick. And then there's one more player who they're
Harrison Bruneke.
Harrison Bruneke as well from Pittsburgh is going to be going down there too. And there could be more. Berkeley Catton of the Seattle Kraken is a possibility. He's eligible if they decide to loan him out. Sam Dickinson, defenseman from San Jose, if they decide to loan him out, he could also join this team. And that would be a lot of NHL flair. I can't remember a time where we've seen that like many NHLers on a team. And that's to go along with, Gavin McKenna and Keaton Verhoff, like the top two projected picks in this year's draft. So I think you would have to look at this team as the favorite if they get all that NHL talent, and they've got two of the best young players, draft eligible players in the tournament this year. I think you'd have to look at them as the favorite.
I mean, Gavin McKenna played top line last year, and he was 16, turning 17 years old, draft -1 season. So that, to me, does speak volumes. Also, of the 27-player list for Canada, 20 first-round picks on that list. And then we took a look at the eligible players that are in the National Hockey League right now. Under 20, the cutoff is you have to be 19 years old on December 31st during the tournament. So it does split between the 2 years. The final is always the first week of January, but if you're 20 by then, it's all good, but you have to be 19 or younger on the turn of the calendar. And there are currently 13 players in the National Hockey League that meet that goal. One of them is Russian, Matvei Gridin, and I'm a huge fan of his game, plays for, ironically, a Canadian team. but he's Russian. Russia will not be a part of this World Juniors. Guess how many of the other 12 are Canadian?
Are Canadian? 9?
12.
All the other 12.
All the other 12, all Canadian. Under 20 players that have played in the NHL this season. So I'm counting Braden Coots, who all got sent back to junior but did play in the NHL. Yeah, 12 for 12 from Canada.
Yeah, I think Brady Martin, Jet Lushenko, those guys also will, played some NHL games this year and will have an opportunity to play for Team Canada.
The biggest questions, you mentioned Berkeley Catton. The other one I'm interested in is Sam Dickinson, who's played 24 games for the San Jose Sharks, hasn't looked out of place. This would not be a demotion, but I do think that there is something to be said about the experience that's gained at a tournament like this, and especially for a guy like Dickinson, who was on the team last year and faced that disappointment in Ottawa. I feel like a chance at redemption could be a good experience for not only the player, but the player that team will end up getting back in early January.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned Dickinson as well, and I think that, again, you just look at all of the players that you mentioned, and a majority of them could end up being on this team. Like, of those 12 that have played NHL games that are eligible, I think, Seneca probably not going to get loaned out. Celebrini not going to get loaned out. But
and the youngest of all.
Matthew Schaefer also probably not going to get loaned out. But those other 9, is it likely that all 9 of those guys end up on the team?
The one that, Pittsburgh Penguins fans and Locked On Penguins would see Ben Kindle is too valuable to what Pittsburgh's doing right now. I look at the numbers and I say, okay, 7 goals. That's sick. Great for him as a 18, 19-year-old. But I just really think that it's valuable experience and that they should. My flaming hot take is that if you're eligible, you should have to play. But I understand that the NHL games during that time are more important for those players to play in. But as a fan, I want to see true best on best under 20. I know it's impossible to do, but that's just my own personal vendetta that I'm looking at. I know it'll never happen, but no chance Schaefer goes, no chance Celebrini goes, but man, would it be fun to see those guys at that level.
Dude, Celebrini would just absolutely murder that tournament. Like the guy might score 30 goals at that tournament if he were to go. Like, it would be insanity. He would set records. It'd be crazy. Guys, I got 3rd in the league now. McDavid had a couple points last night to move ahead of him, but top 3 in scoring as a 19-year-old in the NHL. You're going to dominate the junior level. So it makes sense. There's no reason for him to go. But I still think Team Canada should be the favorites despite not having him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And for our American listeners, there are no NHL US eligible players because Zeev Buium, who was drafted in 2024. So in terms of draft year, you think he'd be eligible. But like I said, you have to be 19 when the tournament starts. And he turned 20 on December 7th. So just a few days ago. So he's ineligible. They do have Trevor Connolly. He plays with the Henderson Silver Knights, Vegas's farm team. So he was on their preliminary roster. So he will be in that tournament. Mikey, this just speaks to my point. I want to see records. I want to see all the excitement, the best players. Connor Bedard, as a 17-year-old, has the 3rd most points in a single World Juniors and then didn't play his last 2 eligible years because he's in the NHL. So, I want the best players to be lighting up that tournament. Little trivia. Do you know what the record is for World Juniors? Most points in a tournament. The games played is 7.
In a tournament?
In one single World Juniors, 7 games.
Was
to Hockey Hall of Fame.
Tavares? Oh, a Hall of Famer.
Earlier than that.
In Lindros?
No. Lindros is not in the top 10. We've got Peter Forsberg, and it ain't even close.
I was just thinking Canadians. I 100% was only thinking of Canadians.
Yeah, that's very Canadian of you at the World Juniors.
Well, we've been talking nothing but Canada. I figured it was going to be a Canadian team. But...
No, Bedard's the most in a tournament by a Canadian, and it's not close.
And I think Cody Hodgson's up there too, if I'm not mistaken.
You might be mistaken. He's tied for 20th.
There's but overall points, though. Overall points. I think
I'm looking at one single tournament for me right now.
If you look at overall points, I'm pretty sure Cody Hodgson's like up there.
Yeah. Well,
like
Peter
top 5.
Forsberg had 31 points in 7 games.
That's decent.
Pretty decent line because number 2 was his line mate in that tournament. Marcus Naslund had 24. So those two completely torched the tournament. We love the World Juniors. I don't know if it's more of a Canadian thing. TSN obviously jumps on it. It's our ESPN up here, and they absolutely adore it. And so do we, because junior hockey is as unpredictable as it gets, and just the wild swings of momentum and everything that comes along with the World Juniors. We're going to be fired up to watch this one this holiday season, as the tournament always begins on Boxing Day. A player that has had success in the World Juniors, a 3-0 record in just the one tournament he played in, is Jacob Fowler. But it is now too early for the Montreal Canadiens to be calling him up and potentially getting his NHL debut. We'll have that conversation next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're a true diehard NHL fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. You can head to Supercast and join the Everydayer Club to unlock all access. All access to the Montreal Canadiens is being granted to Jacob Fowler, the 21-year-old top goalie prospect, a third-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft, had a phenomenal career at Boston College. In 2 seasons at BC, he had a 57-13-3 record with a .932 save percentage. What does he do in the AHL? Comes up at the end of last season, has a taste of playoff action, and this year has a 10-5-0 record with a .919 save percentage. More so splitting, alternating starts at the beginning of the season, but of late he has played in a number of critical games and has allowed 2 or less goals in 4 of his last 5 appearances. Your thoughts on the decision to call up Jacob Fowler? The Habs are obviously going through a number of injuries right now, but this to me feels like it might just be for depth, but in where the Habs are in their rebuild to contention, I know they overperformed last year, made the playoffs. That feels like it hurried everyone. I've been saying like next year is go time for the Montreal Canadiens. So to me, I think it would be great to see, if I'm a Habs fan, which I'm not, full disclosure, that Fowler gets some games this year to adjust and see what it's like. And then he could be the guy next season when it's time for them to compete.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're ready to compete now, to be honest with you. They can definitely push for a playoff spot. They're right there. I like their forward group. It's a young up-and-coming blue line as well. They're just missing that goalie position. And look, this guy's played goalie at a very high level over the last couple of years, whether it's in college or down in the American League this season. I actually like the bet. I do. And I think you can look around the NHL and you can see the amount of young goalies who are really, really playing at a high level this season and be comfortable making that bet. Like, I think, earlier, like years ago, the kind of thought process was you got to let them season a bit. Goaltenders, they can get discouraged. You want them to get as much seasoning in the American League as possible and then bring them up in their mid-20s. That's kind of been the recipe for goaltenders. But you look at this year, and you look at, who's leading the league when it comes to goalies. I mean, Jesper Wallstedt, super young player, technically rookie of the year eligibility, leads the league, a .936 save percentage and a .195 goals against. Dennis Hildeby has been unbelievable in Toronto here. He's got a .936 save percentage this season. We've obviously been impressed with a lot of young players. Spencer Knight has had a really solid season. Lucas Dostal has been a solid player. So there's a lot of guys. Dustin Wolf last year, as a youngin, came in and had an unbelievable season. Jacob Dobish has played well as a young player. So I think there's maybe a changing of the guard in terms of not having trust and faith in young goaltenders, because I think we're seeing a lot of these young goalies really kind of start to step in and make positive impacts on their teams.
Yeah, we saw that last year in Ottawa, where Levi Merilainen's stretch really solidified them at the end of the year to make the playoffs. He's been more average to a bit above average. The first game he played this year ruined all his stats, 8 goals against the Buffalo Sabres. But that aside, it does show that young goalies can come in and make an impact. And I mentioned the Habs are dealing with injuries. Those are all forwards and defensemen. They're just not trusting their goaltending right now. And if you look at it, Samuel Montembeault is third worst in goals saved above expected, minimum of 10 games played this year. Only Binnington and Ullmark are worse than him in that metric. And last night was a clear example of what is wrong with the Habs goaltending. I mean, Dobish gets yanked, and then it's a brutal goal from Samuel Montembeault in the third period. Now, were they likely going to come back from down 3 goals heading into the third? No, but it was still a brutal angle that beat him. And you're like, okay, I think it's time that we at least see something different. So I think they're going to give him a start. I mean, why would they call him up to have a 3-goalie system?
I agree.
They're not going to use him, right?
Ross, I think they look at him as their goalie of the now, not the goalie of the future. I think they're calling up Fowler. They're going to give him a legit opportunity to claim the net. I legitimately think that's what they're doing here. They think, and they did this years ago with Carey Price, where he was very young, I think 20 years old, 21 years old. And they said, you know what, let's bring him up and see what he's got. And turned out pretty well. Now, I'm not saying Fowler is going to end up being Carey Price.
Why don't you go a step further? They did that with Patrick Waugh, and he won the Stanley Cup.
There you go. There's a history in Montreal of this happening. When they see a good young goaltender, they give them an opportunity. So I think, there's a strong chance that Fowler will end up being the de facto starter going forward. If he can continue to play at the level he's played at in the American League, I think there's no question about that. He'll be given an opportunity to steal that net.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, because he is a phenomenal goalie prospect, and one that I think the Habs stole in the third round. Back to Patrick Waugh just real quick. Wild. This guy won the Conn Smythe before his rookie season in the NHL. That is outrageous statistic there. But I think the Habs are just looking for average goaltending right now. But the reason why I say, again, sticking with it, the fact that I feel like they're just not there yet is how many of their wins are coming either in overtime, shootouts. Their last 2 wins both coming in a shootout over Toronto, over Winnipeg. They're either winning close games, it feels like, or they're losing exceptionally bad. 5-1 loss to LA, 7-0 against Dallas, 8-4 against Washington, 7-2 against Colorado, 5-2 against Ottawa, 6-1 last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I just think that they're going through growing pains, and I don't think that that's an indictment on the long-term plan for the Habs. I'm seeing some Habs fans saying that they should fire Marty St. Louis and move on and this and that. I think that patience is a virtue here for the Habs, who I think some around the team, fans that is, might kind of forget for a moment when they are showing electric potential that this is still a young team, and the grind of an NHL season can get the best of these young players at times. The next 2 games for Montreal, at Pittsburgh tomorrow, and then at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night. Do you spot him in one of those games, or do you wait until they get home, get a couple practices in, and then they've got McDavid and Draisaitl waiting at home on December 14th?
Pittsburgh. I play him in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of like the idea of giving the kid MSG for his first NHL game.
But I want to give him a weaker opponent, and I feel as though the Penguins are a weaker opponent than the Rangers, despite the standings.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Jacob Fowler next. Locked On Canadiens will be all over that one. We appreciate everybody making us your first listen each and every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. For more, go check out Locked On Maple Leafs, Locked On Senators, and all the great shows we have on the network. For today, we say goodbye. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been another edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, your team every day.